Residency applications just underwent a shakeup, and a lot of people think it's a victory for applicants. They're mistaken. The revision is meant to improve how an applicant's scholarship gets assessed, but it won't be enough to slow an escalation that's already in full swing. We'll break down exactly why, what the numbers actually show, and what this means for your approach this cycle and beyond. Dr. Jubal, MedSchoolInsiders.com. To make sense of any of this, you need to rewind to when Step 1 switched to pass/fail. Once Step 1 scores disappeared, programs needed a different way to screen candidates. The remaining hard numbers, Step 2 CK and research output, became even more critical. The average research count for matched neurosurgery applicants climbed from 23.4 to 25.5 between 2020 and 2022. Dermatology rose from 19 to 20.9. Orthopedic surgery inched up from 14.3 to 16.5. Noticeable growth, but fairly modest. Then, Step 1 went pass/fail, and everything sped up. By 2024, neurosurgery had leapt to 37.4, nearly a 12-item jump in just 2 years, compared with only 2 the previous 2 years. Dermatology climbed from 20.9 to 27.7. Orthopedic surgery went from 16.5 to 23.8. We anticipate these figures will climb even higher once the 2026 numbers come out this summer. You can follow how research counts have shifted by field at specialtyrank.com. The race was already accelerating before Step 1 became pass/fail, but that shift added fuel to a fire already blazing. The WAMC's answer was to overhaul the section so it emphasizes quality instead of sheer quantity. The old publications section has been swapped out for a scholarly work section. The categories are more streamlined, and now only work submitted to peer-reviewed outlets counts. Journal articles, book chapters, journal abstracts, oral presentations, and poster presentations. Applicants can flag up to 3 entries as their most significant, and first author status now shows up directly on the application. This overhaul comes after programs pushed back, arguing that lengthy publication lists without context don't paint the full picture. A single research project could show up 4 times over, as an abstract, a poster, a talk, and a manuscript. The redesigned section tries to push applicants to explain what they actually did, their role, and how it ties into their career direction. The goal is to slow the surge in average research counts across specialties, particularly the ultra-competitive ones like neurosurgery, where the average has already climbed past 37. But while tweaking how entries get listed does have some real effect, those cheering this on aren't seeing the whole story. Renaming a section doesn't change what programs actually want. In competitive fields, quantity paired with quality has always been the standard, and a cosmetic overhaul of the display format won't alter that. A program director sifting through hundreds of applications will still clock the gap between an applicant with 10 publications and one with 50 poster presentations and no print credits. The most meaningful work highlight adds a bit of extra context, but it's layered on top of the total count, not a replacement for it. There's another wrinkle. Restricting the section to peer-reviewed work might not ease pressure on applicants at all. It could actually funnel more pressure directly onto peer-reviewed output, since that's now the only thing this section shows. Students who put real effort into op-eds, policy work, advocacy, or medical humanities lose that visibility. It gets pushed into a different part of the application that program directors are far less likely to examine closely. This doesn't cool down the race, it just makes life harder for a specific group of applicants. Plenty of people are pointing this out. The AMA formally weighed in at their 2025 interim meeting, adopting a policy that calls for fair consideration of research, advocacy, service, teaching, and mentorship in residency selection. But make no mistake, this isn't a mandate. Programs aren't obligated to change anything. The nation's largest physician organization is on record saying research gets overweighted, and this redesign won't genuinely fix that. That says a lot. Raising the research bar also deepens an existing equity issue. Students at large, well-resourced universities have access to opportunities and connections that students at smaller or less prominent schools just don't have. Reworking the section doesn't address that gap. If anything, leaning harder on peer-reviewed output widens it. Medical school is still just 4 years long without a research year tacked on. The curriculum hasn't grown to make room for research as the race heats up, so something else gets squeezed instead, whether that's clinical hours, study time, or sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Competitive programs have been running their own informal scoring systems for years. Publications rank above abstracts and presentations. Talks outrank posters. First author credit beats secondary authorship, and journal impact factor factors into the calculation. Programs built these systems because they needed a way to tell apart applicants who did substantial work from those who padded their list without producing much of anything. This redesign didn't create that dynamic or fix it, it just formalized what programs were already doing informally. The WAMC's stance is that program directors requested this change. The old format made it tough to gauge an applicant's actual involvement in their research. The new one forces them to spell out their role, their contribution, and what the project entailed. In theory, this gives programs a sharper view of who did meaningful work versus who was the 11th name on a paper they barely touched. Optimists might argue the most meaningful flag could gradually reshape how applicants approach research. Over several cycles, students might start optimizing for quality since the application now rewards it, and programs could adjust in response. Some are even predicting average research counts could fall, but that seems unlikely. For that to happen, program directors would need to fundamentally rethink how they evaluate candidates. There are still far more applicants than open spots. They're still hunting for every possible signal to distinguish one strong candidate from another. Applicants will adjust to whatever format exists and compete just as fiercely within it. If you've caught the Sheriff of Sodium video on the research escalation, it's a great watch. That video digs into whether this research push actually benefits science at a systemic level. Worth checking out. Today we're zeroing in on what it specifically means for med school and residency applications. First, for pre-meds. Research is what we'd call the ultimate extracurricular, and the reason is straightforward. It's the only activity that carries over past college. Every publication, abstract, and presentation you rack up as an undergrad transfers onto your residency application too. Nothing else you do in college works that way. If you're not eyeing a competitive specialty right now, that could shift. 72% of pre-meds either switch their minds or remain unsure about their specialty once they hit med school. Keep your options open, since there's a real chance your interest will change once you're exposed to different career paths. Clinical research tends to be the more practical route for most pre-meds. You're handling chart reviews, database work, and staying closer to the clinical side rather than the bench. Turnaround is quicker, and you're less likely to sink 2 years into a single project that never leads to authorship. Basic science research can be more impressive when it pans out, but it's riskier. The smartest approach for most pre-meds is clinical research that generates several items over time. Ideally, start reaching out a few months into freshman year. Ramping up in a lab takes time, and it's sustained commitment that programs genuinely value. A 10 to 20% reply rate from cold emails is typical, so don't get discouraged easily. Send more emails than you think you'll need. To make this easier, grab our free research outreach email template linked below. I made this exact mistake for 3.5 years in college, and most pre-meds do too. You join a lab, show up, and wait around for instructions. The issue is that the PI you're working under is always weighing a trade-off. Spend 90 minutes explaining something to you, or just knock it out themselves in 30. If you're not actively pushing things along, you can guess how that math plays out. The result is a weaker recommendation letter and fewer research credits, not because you didn't put in effort, but because merely showing up isn't the same as contributing value. Taking ownership of the research process, learning how to drive projects forward, that's what actually shifts your outcomes. It's something I didn't figure out until med school, and it's the whole foundation of our research course. If you're already in med school, here's what matters. In 2024, unmatched applicants actually had higher average research counts than matched applicants, 11 versus 10 across all specialties. So quantity alone was never the full answer. In practice, that means targeting medium to high quality research at scale. And to be clear, it doesn't need to be groundbreaking. Nobody's expecting you to revolutionize patient care, but it does need substance. A stack of case reports and narrative literature reviews won't get you as far as you'd hope. Narrative reviews are a completely different category from systematic reviews, and programs can tell the difference. Genuine involvement in solid work, with first author credit and something real to say about your part in it, beats a bloated list of loosely earned items. Despite having only one third author publication and one fourth author abstract before med school, I graduated with 29 publications and 66 total research items, the bulk of them as first author. 10 years later, without a single new project since, I'm still among the top 5% most cited physicians on Doximity, and according to ResearchGate, my H-index sits at 16. That's what medium to high quality research at scale actually looks like, and it's absolutely doable in med school with the right approach. You can learn how I went from 2 research items as a pre-med to 66 by med school through the link below. You can also browse all 66 items on my site at chemabalmd.com on the About page. If you're in med school, get started earlier than you think you need to. Choose something within your target specialty and try to genuinely own part of the project. Even if a competitive specialty isn't on your radar right now, that might change with more exposure, so keep your options open. When the 2026 numbers land this summer, research count averages will be higher yet again. But that won't tell us whether this change actually worked. The scholarly work section doesn't even kick in until this June, meaning the first cycle it touches is 2026 applicants matching in 2027. That means we won't see data reflecting its real impact until 2028 at the earliest. I'll circle back to this then, and I'd be genuinely surprised if the numbers go anywhere but up. Years of mounting research demands have driven students toward chasing publications that have little bearing on becoming a competent physician. The WAMC knows this. That's not what's in dispute. What's in dispute is whether reshuffling how items get displayed actually changes the incentives behind the problem. It doesn't. There are still more applicants than positions. Programs are still hunting for every signal available. Applicants will adapt and compete just as intensely within whatever framework exists. Average research counts vary enormously by specialty, anywhere from 4 to 37 in the most competitive fields. To see exactly where your target specialty falls, check out the video linked right here.